Welcome back to Dark Leaves Whisper, where shadows speak and echoes tell the truth. Tonight, we step into moments beyond the veil, the newest chapter in our descent through the unseen. Thank you for joining us. If you're already subscribed, we see you, we appreciate you, your support keeps the lantern lit in these forgotten woods. If you haven't subscribed yet, take a moment now so you won't miss what the veil chooses to reveal next. Alright, let's go ahead and listen. Story 1, The Mango Whisper. I hadn't been back to my grandmother's village in Tamil Nadu since I was 7. That year changed everything. My grandmother passed away suddenly in her sleep the day after we shared mangoes under the big tree behind her house. I still remember the smell of ripe mangoes and the warm sun casting long shadows across the dusty courtyard. She laughed and said, "A stomach full of mangoes means a heart full of summer," and that line has stuck with me all my life. Growing up in Chennai, the city's relentless pace swallowed up memories like a hungry tide. But the village, that patch of earth where I first knew love and loss, lingered in my dreams. After she died, my parents wouldn't take me back. The house was left abandoned, and with every year that passed, the memory of her faded like old paint cracking on a door. I was 30 now, living in Bangalore, buried in the chaos of tech startups and endless Zoom calls. Life had become a blur of meetings, deadlines, and traffic jams. But last month, during a business retreat to Coimbatore, I found myself near that village again. My heart clenched with a sudden urge to see it, to feel it once more. On a whim I didn't fully understand, I asked my cab driver to take a detour. The road narrowed into a dusty path, flanked by fields of sugarcane swaying under the afternoon sun. The village looked much the same, except quieter, lonelier. When I arrived, the sun was dipping low, turning the sky a gradient of pink and orange. The old wooden gate creaked open under my hand. Inside, the courtyard was overgrown with wild grass, but the mango tree stood tall, its thick branches twisting like ancient arms reaching for the heavens. I dropped my bag and sat beneath the tree. The air smelled of earth and mango, heavy with summer's sweetness and the decay of time. The cicadas hummed softly, a lullaby to the fading light. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the silence wash over me. Then I heard it. Her voice, soft, warm, unmistakably hers, whispered, "You always give more when you have less." My eyes snapped open. No one was there, just the tree and the shadows lengthening on the cracked earth. My heart skipped a beat as a sudden thump at my feet startled me. I looked down to find a mango glowing softly in the twilight. It was ripe, warm to the touch, and impossibly fresh, though it was far from mango season. I picked it up, the skin smooth and pulsing almost like a heartbeat. The memories came rushing back, her peeling mangoes with a silver spoon, humming ancient lullabies I'd forgotten, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. "Potty?" I whispered, my voice cracking. Only the wind answered, rustling the leaves above. I spent hours there, talking to her in my mind, telling her about my life, my regrets, my loneliness. I confessed that I had been afraid to come back, afraid to face the memories. But under that tree, I felt something shift, an invisible thread pulling me home. Night fell. The sky spilled stars like spilled sugar. I lay back against the tree's rough bark, listening to the whispers of the village settling to sleep. Days later, I brought the mango home. It sat on my altar in my small apartment, a beacon of love and loss. I watched it soften, then carefully planted its seed in a pot by my window. Every morning, I watered the tiny sapling, telling it stories of potty, of summer afternoons and laughter, of a love that refuses to fade with time. Most people would call this foolish, a hallucination, a dream born of grief. But I know what I felt. That was not just memory. That was her whispering across the distance, reminding me that love never truly dies. And in the quiet moments before sleep, I swear I hear her voice in the rustling leaves outside my window, soft, steady, like a promise, you are never alone. Story 2, Dance of the Spirits. Festa Junina is the heartbeat of my hometown, São João do Paraíso. Every June, the streets burst with music, bonfires, and the laughter of neighbors dressed in plaid shirts and straw hats. The whole town celebrates with a wild joy that pulls everyone in, even the loners. I was 22 the last time I danced during Festa Junina, and that night changed my life forever. The air was thick with the smell of roasted corn and sweet pea tamalek. Families gathered around bonfires, faces glowing orange under the flickering flames. Children ran between stalls, waving sparklers that crackled like tiny fireworks. I was leaning against the wooden fence, savoring sugarcane juice with friends when Anna tugged my hand. "Come dance with me," she laughed, her eyes sparkling like stars. I hesitated, the weight of a long day tugging at me, but her enthusiasm was contagious. I smiled and let her pull me onto the dance floor where the quadrilla was in full swing. The dance mimics a country wedding, full of lively steps, calls of vinosum, "Go for us," and playful teasing. Soon, I was spinning and stomping, caught in the joyous rhythm. But as we danced, an eerie chill crept up my spine, cutting through the summer heat. I glanced toward the churchyard and caught sight of an old man standing in the shadows. His clothes were torn and faded like something from decades ago, and his eyes were empty, void of warmth. He stared right at me. I blinked and he was gone. Anna's smile faltered, growing too wide and forced. Her eyes, once warm and lively, turned glassy and distant. The music slowed, warping into a mournful, haunting melody, a funeral march cloaked in folk tune. The dancers' movements became stiff and jerky like marionettes on invisible strings. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. Anna's hand slipped from mine, replaced by a cold grip that squeezed my wrist tightly. "Dance," whispered a voice right by my ear. I tried to shout, but no sound came out. The bonfire's flames shifted from warm orange to an unnatural blue, casting twisted shadows that danced along the ground. Ghostly figures emerged from the darkness, men and women dressed in old-fashioned clothes, faces pale and blurred, some missing eyes or mouths. They circled the dance floor, eyes filled with desperation. I remembered my grandmother's stories about Espíritus do Arraial, spirits trapped to dance forever after dying during past festivals, cursed to search for someone to join their eternal quadrilla and set them free. The old man was one of them. My body moved of its own accord to the strange rhythm, my steps mirroring the sorrowful dance of the dead. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it was seconds. I could feel their sadness, their longing in every step, every breath. Finally, the music stopped. I collapsed to the ground, gasping. The spirits faded. The bonfire returned to its warm glow. Anna was back, shaken but herself. I never told anyone what really happened. They would have called me crazy. But every festa junina since, I hear faint footsteps and whispers calling me back to the dance. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder how many of us are just shadows, dancing between worlds, waiting for the music to bring us home. Story 3: The Forgotten Melody. I grew up in a small village on the west coast of Ireland where the hills roll endlessly, cloaked in mist and green, and the ocean's wild song is a constant backdrop. Stories and legends were part of our lives, tales of fairies, banshees, and restless spirits that wandered the moors on misty nights. As a kid, I thought they were just stories, bedtime myths to keep us from wandering too far. But after the summer I turned 18, I came to understand that some stories are more real than we think. That summer, my grandfather passed away. He was the village fiddler, a quiet man with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. His music was the heartbeat of every gathering, the lively reels, the mournful airs. After the funeral, I helped my grandmother clean out his old cottage. In the attic, hidden beneath a dusty tarp, I found an old violin case. Inside lay his cherished fiddle, its varnish cracked with age, and a small leather-bound journal filled with handwritten music and strange symbols I couldn't read. One evening, I took the fiddle down to the edge of the village where the fields met the foggy moorlands. The sun had just slipped behind the hills and the first stars blinked awake. I opened the journal and played the first tune I saw, a melody unlike any I'd heard before, soft, haunting, with notes that seemed to weep. The air grew thick with mist as I played, and I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. From the swirling fog, shapes began to materialize, ghostly figures dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces pale but filled with an otherworldly light. They moved in time with the music, swirling and twirling like dancers at a long-forgotten ball. The village seemed to fade away, leaving only the music and the spirits. One figure stepped forward, a young woman with fiery red hair that shimmered like flames in the moonlight. Her eyes held a sorrow so deep it felt like it could drown me. "Sean," she whispered, voice like a breeze through the heather, "you have awakened the melody of the lost." She told me her name was Aoife, a spirit trapped between worlds, bound by a broken promise that had kept her from passing on. The melody I played was her prison and her hope. The music bound the spirits to this place, and only by completing the final verse could they be freed. Each night after that, I returned to the moor to play. The spirits appeared, their faces shifting between joy and despair as they danced and sang with me beneath the moon. They shared stories, tales of love lost to time, of betrayal, and of promises broken under stormy skies. Their voices wove with the fiddle song a chorus of echoes from the past. But with the melody came shadows, dark shapes lurking just beyond the flicker of the spirit's light, whispering threats that chilled me to my core. Aoife warned me these shadows fed on sorrow and could drag us all into darkness if the final verse wasn't played before the next full moon. I tried to learn the last verse from the journal, but the notes were written in an ancient script, impossible to decipher. Aoife appeared one night, placing her cold hand on mine. "Let me help you," she said, her eyes softening. Together, we practiced, her ghostly fingers guiding mine over the strings. On the night of the full moon, the entire village seemed to hold its breath. I played the final verse as the spirits gathered around me, their forms glowing brighter than ever. The air shimmered, and a wave of warmth washed over the moor as the music reached its peak. Aoife smiled, tears glistening in her ethereal eyes. "Thank you, Sean. You have freed us." The spirits rose, dissolving into the night like morning mist, and the shadows vanished with them. The village felt lighter, as if a heavy veil had lifted. From that summer on, I keep my grandfather's fiddle close. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, I hear the faint echo of the melody, a reminder that some stories never truly end. Story 4: The Lantern's Glow. When I was a teenager growing up in a small fishing town on the coast of Shikoku, summer was always marked by the Obon Festival. It's an ancient tradition in Japan, a time when families honor the spirits of their ancestors by welcoming them back home with lanterns, music, and dance. The whole village would come alive with lanterns floating on the dark sea, their warm light like tiny stars drifting on the waves. But for me, the festival became more than just a celebration. It was the beginning of an experience that forever changed how I understood the world. I remember the last night of the festival vividly. The streets were filled with laughter and the faint sound of drums and flutes, the air thick with the scent of incense and grilled fish. My grandfather, a quiet man with a solemn presence, handed me a small paper lantern with a candle burning inside. His hands were rough but steady as he passed it to me. "Kenji," he said softly, "place this lantern on the water. It will guide the spirits home." I nodded, my fingers trembling slightly as I carried the lantern to the edge of the shore. The sea was calm, but the night was dark, almost unnaturally so, with only the stars and the glowing lanterns lighting the bay. I knelt down and gently set my lantern on the water, watching as the current caught it and it began to drift among hundreds of others. But then something strange happened. One lantern, brighter than the rest, began to float closer to me, its flame flickering wildly as if it had a life of its own. I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. The noise of the crowd faded, replaced by a silence so complete it was almost deafening. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft and distant, carried on the night breeze. "Kenji!" I spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. The villagers were still watching the lanterns, oblivious to the voice that called my name. My grandfather was silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon. That night, I lay awake in bed, the voice repeating in my mind like a haunting melody. I could feel a presence, something unseen but unmistakably close. Sleep evaded me, replaced by a growing unease. The next morning, my grandfather was gone. His small boat was moored to the dock, but he was nowhere to be found. The villagers whispered that he had gone out to sea alone, but I knew something else had happened. Something connected to the voice, the lantern, and the spirits I had heard calling. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen around the house. I would catch glimpses of flickering lights in the corners of my eyes, soft, glowing orbs that vanished whenever I tried to look directly at them. Doors creaked open by themselves, and the scent of incense would drift through the rooms even though no one had lit any. At school, I felt a constant chill, like an invisible breath brushing past me. My friends noticed I was distracted, but when I tried to explain, they only laughed it off as stress or imagination. One evening, unable to bear the restless feeling, I wandered toward the edge of the forest near the beach, hoping to find some peace. That's when I saw her. She stood beneath a towering cedar tree, bathed in pale moonlight. A woman in a flowing white kimono, her long black hair cascading like ink down her back. Her face was beautiful yet hauntingly pale, almost translucent, with eyes that shimmered like stars but held a deep sadness. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She smiled sadly. "I am Yuki. I have waited a long time for someone to see me." I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. She reached out her hand, and as I took it, a warmth spread through me, calming the fear and replacing it with a strange sense of connection. Over the following weeks, I visited her nightly. Yuki told me her story, a tragic tale of a young woman who had been lost to a storm at sea decades ago. Bound by grief and unfinished business, her spirit lingered near the village, trapped between worlds. She had been waiting for someone like my grandfather to help her find peace, but he had chosen to join her in the spirit realm, leaving me behind. Her presence was both comforting and unsettling. I could feel the weight of her sorrow, but also a gentle kindness. She spoke of memories long faded, of family and love, and of the loneliness that comes with being forgotten. One night, Yuki asked me to help her find a lantern she had lost, the one that could release her from the ties that bound her to this world. Together, under the light of a full moon, we searched the shoreline. The water was cold and dark, but I dove in, feeling the sand shift beneath my hands. After what felt like hours, my fingers closed around something smooth and wooden. I pulled the lantern to the surface, its flame still burning bright despite the water. As I held it high, the lantern's glow spread like wildfire across the bay, lighting every corner with a warm, golden light. Yuki's form began to shimmer, her smile widening. "Thank you, Kenji," she whispered, before slowly dissolving into the night air. From that day forward, the strange lights stopped, and my grandfather's boat was found washed ashore, empty but undamaged. The village seemed lighter, as if a long-held sorrow had finally lifted. Every year since, I release a lantern in their memory, watching it drift into the night, hoping it carries my gratitude to the spirits beyond. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear a soft whisper in the breeze, a gentle voice calling my name. Story 5: The Whispering Shadows. Growing up in a quiet town nestled among the mountains of rural Japan, the seasons shaped our lives. Spring's cherry blossoms, the warmth of summer festivals, and the deep snows of winter were woven into my memories. But beneath the beauty of the landscape, our elders spoke in hushed tones about the Yurei, restless spirits bound by sorrow and unfinished business, wandering between this world and the next. I didn't give much thought to these stories until the autumn I turned 20. That year, my grandmother, who had been the guardian of our family shrine, passed away. She had always been a quiet woman, full of wisdom and secrets, especially about the spiritual world. After her funeral, I stayed behind in the old family home to care for the shrine, feeling both honored and burdened by the responsibility. One evening, while sorting through her belongings, I found an ancient, weathered book filled with faded calligraphy and drawings of shadowy figures. Among the pages, I discovered a small, folded piece of paper with a handwritten note in her delicate script: "Beware the shadows that whisper at night." That night, as the wind howled through the trees, I sat by the shrine, the book open before me. Suddenly, I heard soft whispers carried on the breeze, unintelligible but urgent. The shadows beneath the torii gate seemed to stretch and writhe, as if alive. A cold chill settled in my chest. Over the next few nights, the whispers grew louder and clearer. I began to see flickers of movement at the edges of my vision, shadowy figures drifting just beyond the lantern light. They never spoke directly, but their presence was heavy, filled with sorrow and longing. One night, I felt a hand on my shoulder, a cold, invisible touch. Turning quickly, no one was there, but a voice echoed in my mind. Find us? Help us? It was a plea from the lost souls tied to the shrine, trapped by a tragedy long forgotten. Determined to uncover the truth, I dove into my grandmother's book and the shrine's history. I learned of a fire decades ago that had claimed the lives of villagers during a festival. Many had perished in the blaze, their spirits unable to rest, bound to the shrine by grief and anger. Armed with this knowledge, I began nightly rituals to honor the lost, burning incense, offering food, and chanting prayers taught by my grandmother. Slowly, the whispers shifted from despair to gratitude. The shadows grew softer, their edges less defined, as if releasing their pain. One evening, as I chanted, a figure emerged from the shadows. A young woman in a kimono, her eyes filled with tears. She bowed deeply, whispering, "Thank you, Hiroshi. We are finally at peace." Then, like a gentle breeze, she faded into the night. From that time on, the shrine felt alive with calm and warmth. The whispers ceased, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant song of crickets. I understood then that the veil between worlds is thin, and with respect and courage, even the lost can find their way home. Story 6: The Silent Watcher. I grew up on the Navajo Nation reservation, surrounded by vast red deserts, towering mesas, and endless skies that seem to stretch forever. Our people believe in the power of nature, the spirits that live within it, and the sacred balance that holds everything together. Stories about skinwalkers, Yinaldlushiai, shape the fears and warnings we learn from childhood. I never thought I'd have to face one, but when I was 22, alone on a camping trip near the canyon's edge, I came face to face with something I could barely explain. It was a warm fall evening when I set up camp by a small stream. The air smelled of sage and pine, and the sun was dipping behind the cliffs. I was there to find peace, to reconnect with the land and my ancestors. As darkness fell, I sat by the fire, feeling the quiet hum of the desert night. Then, from the shadows at the tree line, I saw a pair of eyes watching me. Glowing faintly amber, too high off the ground for any normal animal. My heart pounded. I stared back, frozen. Suddenly, a figure stepped forward, tall and thin, draped in tattered clothes that seemed to shift like smoke. Its face was neither human nor animal, with a twisted smile and teeth sharp as knives. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I remembered the warnings. Skinwalkers are shapeshifters, beings who take on animal forms to harm or deceive. They are cunning and dangerous, and most importantly, they don't speak. The figure circled the campfire, silent but threatening. I grabbed my medicine pouch and began to chant a prayer taught by my grandmother, calling on the holy people for protection. The skinwalker hissed but did not attack. Hours passed. The fire dwindled, and the figure watched me until dawn's first light. When the sun rose, it vanished into the desert, leaving only footprints that quickly faded in the dust. I never forgot those eyes or that night. Afterward, I learned that many who encounter skinwalkers report similar experiences. Silent watchers, terrifying presences that test your courage. I carry the memory with me, a reminder that the spirit world is never far, and respect for the land and our traditions is the only shield against the shadows. Story 7: The Echoes of the Banyan. My childhood was shaped by the sprawling banyan tree that stood in the courtyard of our ancestral home in Tamil Nadu. That tree was more than just a tree. It was a witness to generations, a silent guardian steeped in stories and secrets. The elders often spoke of Preethas, restless spirits trapped in our world, sometimes tied to places or objects like that banyan. I never believed in ghosts much until the summer I turned 18. It started one evening during the monsoon season. The rain hammered on the tiled roof, and the wind howled through the branches. I was alone in the house. My parents had gone to the temple festival, and my grandmother was visiting a neighbor. As I sat reading, I heard a faint whisper, like the rustling of leaves but clearer. At first, I thought it was the rain or my imagination, but then I felt a cold breath on my neck. I turned abruptly, but no one was there. Over the next few nights, strange things began happening. Footsteps echoed in the hallway when the house was empty. Soft sobbing came from the courtyard, where the banyan stood. I saw shadows flicker in the corner of my eye, figures barely visible, disappearing when I looked directly. One night, curiosity overcame fear. I stepped outside under the banyan tree. The air was thick with humidity and something else, a heavy sadness that pressed down on my chest. Suddenly, I saw her. A woman in a white sari, her hair long and wet from the rain, eyes filled with grief. She spoke no words but pointed to the tree's roots. Kneeling down, I saw something glinting in the mud, a small rusted locket. Inside was a faded photograph of a young girl. My grandmother later told me a story about a girl named Mina who had disappeared near that tree decades ago. No one knew what happened, and her spirit was said to be trapped, unable to move on. Determined to help, I consulted with the village priest and performed a puja, a ritual to appease spirits and free their souls. I stayed awake all night, chanting prayers and offering flowers and sweets beneath the banyan. By dawn, the air felt lighter, the sobbing ceased, and the shadowy figure never returned. That summer, I learned that some echoes of the past linger, but with respect and care, even the most restless spirits can find peace. Story 8. The Frozen Reflection. Growing up in a small Icelandic fishing village, the endless winter nights shaped my childhood. The cold wasn't just in the air. It seeped into stories my grandmother told by the hearth. Stories of Draugr, restless dead who rose from their graves to haunt the living. I laughed off those tales as a kid, but one winter changed everything. I was 19 and had taken a job helping out at the local fish processing plant. One evening, after a long shift, I stopped by a frozen pond near the edge of town to clear my head. The surface was thick with ice, reflecting the pale moonlight like a mirror. As I leaned over, I noticed a face in the ice. Not my own, but pale and hollow-eyed, staring back at me. I blinked, and it vanished, replaced by my reflection. I told myself it was a trick of the light or exhaustion. But then, strange things began happening. At night, I heard footsteps crunching on the snow outside my window, even though no one was there. The air grew icy cold inside my room, and I felt a constant chill that no heater could chase away. One night, I woke to see a shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed. A man in tattered clothes, his eyes glowing faintly blue. Frozen in place, I couldn't scream or move. He reached out and I felt a cold touch on my cheek, like ice. Then he vanished. I learned from the village elder that the Draugr were souls trapped by vengeance or sorrow, often tied to water or burial grounds. They could walk the earth, seeking to reclaim what they lost or warn the living. Determined to protect myself, I followed ancient customs, burning juniper branches, sprinkling salt around my home, and reciting old prayers passed down through my family. Gradually, the presence lessened, and the cold retreated. One evening, I went back to the pond and saw a faint shimmer beneath the ice, like the spirit was finally at rest, melting away into the night. That winter taught me that even in the coldest darkness, the past can reach out, but with courage and tradition, the living can survive the ghostly shadows. Story 9. The Weeping Willow. Growing up in a small village in County Kerry, Ireland, the landscape was rich with rolling green hills, ancient stone walls, and legends whispered around peat fires. My family owned a modest farmhouse near a river lined with willows, trees that seemed to weep with the wind. The elders spoke of banshees, spirits who wail to warn of death or misfortune. I dismissed it as folklore until the spring when I was 21. It started subtly, with a chill that lingered even in warm sunlight. One evening, as I walked by the willow trees near the river, I heard a soft crying, like a woman sobbing in the distance. I paused, heart quickening, but saw no one. The next night, the crying came again, louder and closer. I told my parents, but they brushed it off as wind or animals. Then, one night, I awoke to a cold breeze and the unmistakable sound of a mournful wail outside my bedroom window. Peering out, I saw a pale woman standing beneath the willow, her long hair tangled, eyes red from tears. She raised her head and let out a piercing scream that froze me in place. In the days that followed, strange things occurred. Objects moving on their own, shadowy figures glimpsed at the edge of vision, and the sorrowful cries echoing through the night. I sought the advice of a local historian who told me about the Bean Sea, the Banshee, a harbinger of death, often tied to family lines and ancient curses. Determined to understand, I researched my family's past and found a tragic story. An ancestor lost her child near that river centuries ago, and some believed her grief had bound her spirit to the land. With the help of a priest and a traditional healer, we held a cleansing ritual at the willow trees, offering prayers, holy water, and sage. That night, the cries softened to whispers, then silence. I still walk by the river, feeling the gentle sway of the willows and a quiet peace where once there was sorrow. The banshee's wail was not a curse but a plea, a reminder that grief, like love, never truly fades. Story 10. The Lantern in the Fog. I grew up near the misty shores of Lake Biwa in Japan, where legends of Yurei, restless spirits bound by regret, were common bedtime tales. My family lived in a small wooden house, surrounded by dense woods and thick fog that rolled in from the lake, swallowing everything in a ghostly embrace. When I was 19, I experienced something I could never explain. One late autumn evening, as the fog crept thick and heavy, I was walking home after visiting a friend. The path through the forest was barely visible, lit only by my small lantern. Suddenly, through the haze, I saw a faint glow ahead, not from my lantern, but a soft, flickering light bobbing gently like a candle flame. Curious and cautious, I followed it. The light led me deeper into the woods, weaving between ancient trees draped with moss. The air was unnervingly still, broken only by distant rustling leaves. Then I saw her, a woman in a white kimono, her long black hair obscuring her face, floating just above the ground. Her lantern cast eerie shadows, and when she turned toward me, her eyes were hollow, empty pools of sorrow. I froze. The stories rushed back, of Yurei trapped between worlds by unfinished business or deep regret. She whispered my name softly, almost a plea. I didn't understand why she knew it, but I felt compelled to help. Over the following days, I researched local legends and found that many had seen the lantern spirit near that forest, an apparition searching for peace. I spoke with a Shinto priest, who guided me in performing a ritual of purification and release. Together, we offered prayers, incense, and a symbolic lantern to light her way. That night, I returned to the forest, lantern in hand, and called softly into the mist. The glowing light appeared once more, flickered, then slowly drifted away, vanishing beyond the trees. From that night on, the forest felt different, calmer, lighter. I learned that sometimes spirits linger not out of malice, but because they need a little help to find their way home. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the veil, where whispers of the past and echoes of the unseen intertwine with our world. These stories, drawn from diverse cultures and lived experiences, remind us that the supernatural isn't just myth or fantasy. It reflects our deepest fears, hopes, and connections beyond the physical realm. Whether it's the sorrowful banshee of Ireland, the restless draugr of Iceland, or the guiding Yurei of Japan, these spirits show us that life and death are not always clear-cut boundaries. Sometimes, the most powerful encounters arise from understanding, compassion, and the courage to face the unknown. If you've ever felt a chill in the air, heard a distant whisper, or glimpsed something just beyond sight, remember, you are not alone. I invite you to share these stories with your friends and family. Until next time, keep your heart open and your lantern lit, for the spirits may be watching, waiting, and sometimes seeking peace. This is Dark Leaves Whisper, signing off from the realm where stories live beyond the veil.